What's up, everyone? Welcome back to another episode of the Unstoppable Dad Project. Thanks for joining us for another week and another episode. Hope the new year has been kind to you so far. While I've got you here, what I would like to ask is a massive favor. If you can jump on and just like and follow us on Facebook and Instagram, the Unstoppable Dad Project on Facebook and at the Unstoppable Dad on Instagram, that would be fantastic. The video versions of these podcasts go up on YouTube each week. I have the last couple of weeks, I've been a little bit slack with it, but they will be up by the end of this week. But if you like to hear these as they come out, make sure that you are subscribed on whatever podcast platform you are listening to this on. So whether that be Spotify, Apple, Google Play, if you're subscribed, you'll get notified as soon as I publish these episodes. Now, this week, I wanted to have a talk about, I guess, motivation. And I've spoken about motivation a lot of times, and you've probably heard the saying, don't rely on motivation, rely on discipline and that type of a thing. But there was some things that I wasn't doing through the week when it came to particular actions that I needed to take. And it really got me thinking of a way to, I guess, hold myself accountable, because I think we all are, when we're dads and we perceive ourselves as the head of the family, we kind of maybe don't hold ourselves to a high enough standard. Or maybe we do. Maybe we're overcritical with ourselves. And there's different times where I am overcritical with myself. But there's also times where I, like a lot of people, tend to take the foot off the gas and potentially slack off a little bit, especially when maybe I'm not quite mentally with it. Maybe I'm feeling a little bit drained and a little bit fatigued with everything that's going on, whether it be world circumstances, business circumstances, and just personally not feeling down. And it's a fluctuating thing that happens for me on a pretty regular basis. And one thing I started thinking about this week was, would I be happy if I seen this behavior in my kids? Because the fact is, I think a lot of behaviors that we subconsciously do, you will start to see in your kids, and a lot of potential things where you may take the foot off the accelerator, you might back up, you might maybe be holding yourself to a lower standard than what you would like to. That type of stuff's going to manifest it. And whether we're blind to it or not, it's going to come up. And whether it comes up from us identifying it, or it comes up because we see it in our children as they get older. One thing that really has kind of kept me on task and kept me focused over the last week is that constant question to myself is, if my child was in this position, and I guess happy isn't the word, like, would I be happy? Or disappointed is probably not even the word either. You're not mad. I'm just disappointed. The old dad line to elicit that guilt emotion. But would I be, I guess, internally disappointed or with what they were doing, i.e., there's something that I would like to see them applying themselves at. We're taking the results out of it. We're inherently talking about effort. They're not putting in the effort. They're not taking the actions that they need to. And there's certain times in my life where I am so hypercritical of myself for things that I'm not doing, to the point where it sometimes will cause me to just be paralyzed, because I have just got such negative self-talk around what I'm doing. But there are other times where I'll flip on the other end of the spectrum and I'll maybe be too easy on myself. And even though you want to be internally motivated, I think every single person that's probably listening to this podcast, they're extrinsically motivated by their family. They want to be the leader for their family. And for most of us, I believe we want to lead by example. And when no one's looking, what's the default? And where do we go? And for me, over the last couple of weeks, I've kind of identified it really depends on what it is as to what my default is. And in doing that, I've kind of taken a step back and gone, look, if I don't take this action or I don't do this task, if I was on the outside looking in and I was kind of looking at my kid and I knew that they got this behavior from me, am I going to be disappointed, not with them, but with myself, because this is something that they've got from me? And that helps me really determine where my standard is. And on those tasks where maybe I would slack off a little bit, I've found that over the course of the last couple of weeks, that's really helped me raise my level to a higher standard and do things that, I may have avoided doing, or I may not have done in the past, or I might have put off until I quote unquote felt like doing it. And that's one side of it. Like, that's the kind of laziness side of it, or the side where you back off. And yes, there is times where you need to take a step back. And I've spoken about this a lot on the podcast on previous episodes, where sometimes you just need to stop, you need to unpack, you need to deal with the emotions that are going on. Because if it's a paralysis, because it is such a high emotional time, you need to deal with that, because simply putting your head down and burrowing through it is not going to, it's going to get you into a worse spot. But if we're talking about just single actions and certain things that maybe we don't want to do, or we don't want to prioritize time for, sometimes positioning it to ourselves of, all right, if I was observing my child with this behavior, and this is an inherent behavior that I see coming up in myself time and time again, and I'm observing my child doing it, am I going to be disappointed that they got it from me? And then if the answer is yes, it kind of forces my hand and forces me into action. And that's one end of the spectrum, I guess, the laziness spectrum. But the other side of it is, if I was talking to, or I was seeing my child speak to either another child, or I was catching myself talk to a child the way I talk to myself, would I be happy or disappointed about that? And this is the other end of the spectrum. So it's like that. It's a spectrum, right? You've got laziness at one end, and then you've got you being hypercritical of yourself at the other end. And for me, I know when I get super hypercritical of myself and potentially things that I'm not doing, like, I will talk to myself in a super unfavorable way. In my head, like, you're not good enough, you're a slack piece of shit, like, you need to do this, you need, and you get caught, when you get caught in that negative self-talk, you get caught in a spiral, and it gets really hard to get out of. And on that side of it, I guess using the same approach, but in a slightly different way, if I was to catch my kid talking to themselves the way I'm internally talking to myself, how would I feel about that? Would I be angry that that's something that they've picked up from me? And of course, or if I was talking to them like that, or I seen somebody else talking to them like that, of course I'm going to be not happy about it. Like, we want to try and treat ourselves kindly and treat those others kindly. Now, it is such a hard thing. And one thing that I know I struggle with, and I'm sure a lot of people do, is like, for me, I'm never just on one end of that spectrum. There's certain things where I'm on the end where I'm probably not doing enough, and maybe I'm taking it too easy on myself. And there'll be times where I'm all the way on the other end. And it's that ebb and flow back and forth. And I never really feel like you get out of that spectrum of being too hard on yourself, maybe not doing enough, doing this, doing that. But really, one thing that I've looked at, and I guess I've worked on internally, is like, would I be happy if I was observing this behavior in my children? Because to me, a lot of what I do is for them. Call that right or wrong. I'm sure a lot of people that listen to this, it's exactly the same thing. A lot of what we do and what we're trying to build and what we're trying to provide is 100% to give our children the best chance in life, whether it be the lessons they're trying to teach. And there's an episode I did on the podcast where words are important, but actions speak louder. And actions and behaviors, and this is what I'm kind of trying to get at, the fact is that overcritical self-talk, or those actions where we're kind of think we're doing them behind closed doors, because if it happens once, and you identify it's happening once, I'll almost guarantee that it's happening in a lot of other aspects of your life. And this is what, I guess this is the process I've started kind of going through over the last, I'd say really heavily in the last probably 8 weeks, but touching on and maybe pulling back from over the last maybe couple of years. But they're going to, like, I truly believe that your children will inherit your actions, right? And they will see what your default setting is. And if that default setting and what they observe a lot is you being hypercritical, poor self-talk, and really like, then that's going to come out in them eventually. If it's the other end of the spectrum where it's taking the easy way out, maybe not taking some actions that maybe we need to when we need to, they're going to see that as well. But that human back and forth is something that's always going to happen. But when I really looked at it, I know that I spend more time on the hypercritical side. But what actually happens is when I'm on the hypercritical side, it almost sends me the other direction where I've been so down on myself that it sends me on the other end of the spectrum where I don't feel like doing anything. So I can almost stop myself from going down the end of the spectrum where I'm not taking action on things by looking at it of a point of view of, hey, if somebody was talking to my child the way I'm talking to myself, how am I going to feel about that? And pretty well 99 out of 100 times I'd be pretty fucking pissed off about it. In fact, I'd probably want to, if that person was an adult, I'd probably want to hurt them. So that has really helped me maybe be a little bit kinder to myself. But then on the other side of things, when maybe I'm not taking the action that I need to, if I was to see this behavior manifest in those that I love the most because they'd inherited it from me, how would I feel about that? The answer is not happy. I wouldn't be happy about that. Not at them. I wouldn't be angry at them. I would be unhappy with myself because that is a learned behavior. Even though I can say to them, hey, like, we've got to hold a high standard. If I'm not embodying that and I'm not doing that, they're not going to hear the words. They're going to see the actions. And positioning things like that has really kind of helped me not stay even keeled because I'm still going back and forth, but identify those phases that I'm in and shortcut them quicker so that I can get back to what I need to do and also get back to being happier. Because that's the thing, when you're on either end of that spectrum, you don't feel happy. You don't feel like you're fulfilled. You don't feel like you're getting anywhere with the things that you're trying to do. So for me, looking at things like that has really helped because my children are everything to my family is everything to me. My wife is everything to me. A lot of what I do is for them. And that's why when faced with times of adversity and hard times, like, that's what gets me through. So to deal with the inner conflict and the things that I've been doing, I've addressed it as if I was to see this as something that they had got from me, and I'm observing that from the outside, and again, removing myself from the situation and trying to be objective, which is something that we've spoken about over and over and over again, how would I feel about that? The answer is probably not too good. So if you need to find some extra motivation, if you need a little bit of a pep talk, think about things a little bit like that. Might help, might not. It's definitely something that's helped me. If you need any help, feel free to reach out. As we always talk about, like, if you're really in a dark spot, reach out and talk to somebody. No ego, no down feelings. No, you need to get through this by yourself. Like, if there's one message that I want to get out with all this, it's that we need to, as men, we need to talk about this. And men of my generation, I think, were brought up that you just get on with it, and you don't have to get on with it. I'm sure you'll be able to find your own tools and your own ways to dealing with it. This podcast is about things that I've learned, whether it be for training or mindset, throughout my experience as a dad, my experience as a man, a human being, a business owner. And that's kind of what today was about. It's just a tool, a way of thinking, a mindset that I've found has been working pretty well for me over the last couple of months, when I feel like I've either got into those really heavy times of really negative self-talk, or I feel like I'm verging on the edge of getting a little bit too lazy and not holding the standard that I want to hold myself to. So hopefully that helps. As always, if you need anything, reach out. Have a great week. We'll see you next week. Bye.